I just think of like
Alright.
Someone was like,
How do we go with the homework?
Yeah, we also have a European review. It was alright.
Abdul, how'd you go? Done?
Yeah.
Easy?
Yeah.
Okay, Daniel? Easy? Done?
Yeah.
Done?
Yeah.
Give me a thumbs up if you've done the homework, guys.
The reading?
The homework that was to read,
I read it.
which was it? Paragraphs 1 to 5?
After that, 5 to... No, it wasn't like 5.
1 to 5 and the 2 textbook pages, yeah? Or 1.5. Yeah, so thumbs up if you've done that? Alright, so everyone else you're going to sort of be catching up with today. Well, I do want to move through this a bit quickly because hopefully you've read it already. Yeah? Let's do a quick survey though. Hand up, like up to the top if you think you completely understand paragraphs 1 to 5. Middle, if you get about half the ideas, and the other half of the ideas you're like, I don't know what's really going on. And then on the table, if you're like, I understood one idea or less. Okay. Cool. That's right. Cool. So, the first paragraph, you guys remember, it says that we have like this idea of ourselves, right? Like we feel that ourselves continue. Yeah, we all have a concept of our own identity. We all happy with that? Cool. He thinks this is a problem, remember? Yeah? So he's going to go on to deny that we have any constant feeling. So, let me sort out my technology. We can move on. Alright. Hume says that this is wrong. So let's read through this. So, would anyone like to read?
I would love to read.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. And then Nick can explain the first sentence. Good job volunteering.
Right, number 2?
Yeah, from number 2.
Unluckily, all of these positive assertions are contrary to that their experience, which is pleaded for them, nor we have any idea of self, after the manner it is here explained.
That's a really hard one. You want to try?
Not really.
Okay. So, unluckily, all these positive assertions, the idea that we have a constant, continuing feeling of ourself, yeah, is actually ridiculous. It's made up, and we don't, in fact, have an idea of self. Yeah? Nick, number 2. Or from, yeah, sentence 2, sorry.
Or from what impression could this idea be derived?
Yep, that's it. Nice. Damon, do you remember what impressions and ideas are for Hume? What's an impression? Abdul, hit me.
Pardon?
Hit me, what's an impression?
Oh, it's a perception.
Good.
It's like how you perceive the world and it changes every moment. So like your identity cannot be the same every year.
Good. So a sensory experience might be one way to put it. So just like Abdul said, at any given moment we have like thousands of impressions going on, sort of in the background, right? And you can focus on one or the other. Yeah? Like I can focus on, if I want, the temperature of the whiteboard when I touch it. Slightly cool is how I would describe it. Yeah?
Is that PowerPoint on Compass?
Yes, it is.
And wait, there was a PowerPoint like this for Lock as well, yeah?
Yeah, not quite this good, but yeah.
That'd be awful.
Yeah. I think the PowerPoint for Locks on Compass, is it, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm still working on a way to have some sort of like common... Compass is fine for dumping resources on, right? So it's not really very good for communication and that kind of stuff. I'm still working on fixing that up. Maybe news next week. Oh, that reminds me. Hand up if you're going away Monday to Wednesday next week. Okay, cool. Thanks. That's all. You will have to look at Compass and read ahead. Yeah. So it says, from what impression, very important, could this idea be derived? What's an idea, Abdul, again?
An to perception.
No.
Okay.
Anyone? For Hume?
It's thought.
It's yeah. I'm gonna go
Like a concept built.
good. A concept
Yeah.
for Hume based on what are concepts built out of initially? Impression. Alright, so he's looking for what a self is. Yeah? So, like, if you guys have ever thought about what stereotypical philosophy is about, it's like, find the inner you. That's what he's doing! This is the find the inner you bit, guys. It's probably a bit less mysterious than you thought it would be. So, he's looking for an inner you, and he says he has this short sentence that says, or from what impression could this idea be derived, come from? Yeah? So what sense experience could our concept of self come from? That's what he's asking. Does that make sense to everyone? It's an important point. Maybe just write a little note next to there so that you remember what he's asking. This is a question. From what experience does our idea of self come from?
I think a wall will break out and America will fire.
Alright. We all good? Cool, Damon. Sentence 3.
This question is impossible to answer without a manifest contradiction. Yeah, it is a question which must necessarily be answered. I love the whole contraction.
It's good, isn't it? This is how. Did you guys know that in
Oh my god, how do I spell
back as far as Hume was writing, there was no spelling, no correct spelling for words. Like that just wasn't a thing that had been like made up or agreed on yet. So you could spell everything however you wanted, as long as it sounded right enough for people to understand it. So a bunch of people put in, obviously just sort of spelled things the way they said them, right? So I like to imagine, even though he's really Scottish, right? I like to imagine he's speaking in a really English accent. He's probably educated in England, I have to figure that out. But that sentence then goes, this question is impossible to answer without a manifest contradiction, yeah? And yet it is a question. Yeah, that's how I imagine it. But anyway, sorry, Damon, keep going. It is a question.
It is a question which must necessarily be answered if we would have the idea of self-past clear and intelligible.
Nice one. So, it's a question that's impossible to answer without contradiction. He's saying there is no experience that leads to a self. And yet, if we're going to have an idea of self, we need some sort of impression that it's built on. Yeah? This is sort of foreshadowing for Hume. He's saying he's not going to say that there is a continuing self. Hume is going to deny that we have a self, an identity, which is a pretty big claim, right? But he's saying that there's no experience, no impression, that we can form a rational idea on that actually applies to the world. Yeah? Alright. If we would have the idea of self pass for clear and intelligible, which means, clear and understandable. That's rational. Yeah. Alright. Kevin, next sentence?
It must be some one impression that gives rise to every real idea.
Nice. What does that sound like a sentence in favour of? A big kind of theory starts with an E. Empiricism. Nice one. So that's like a banner statement for empiricism, and I just wrote next to it empiricism. It must be some one impression that gives rise to every real idea. Who's going to disagree with you in there?
Descartes.
Descartes, right? He thinks you can have a bunch of ideas with no impressions. Yeah? And in fact, he thinks that ideas come before impressions. But Hume disagrees. So, continuing on, Abdul.
But self, a person is not only one impression, without which are several impressions and ideas are suppressed and linked.
Good. Daniel, what does that mean?
I wanted to know, but still.
I don't know, I blacked out.
Anyone else?
We don't have one impression, we have many at one time.
We have
So
many
one is an
impressions.
impression that tells us what our self is.
Good. We have many impressions that contribute to what we call our self. Yeah? So I have an impression right now of like hearing my own voice. I have the impression of my throat working. I have the impression of the temperature of the room. All those normal impressions that we have. And I'm saying that all of them contribute to my idea of self. Yeah? That's how we normally think of ourselves. Think of your own consciousness, right? The thought of your own voice in your head. It's actually a bunch of different impressions. Everyone see that? Cool. Daniel, next sentence.
For self, wait. If any impression gives rise to the idea of self, that impression must continue invariably the same through the whole course of our lives, since self is supposed to exist after that manner.
Nice one. Andy?
If there's no like impression of myself, that impression must stay the same.
Right, and self's supposed to be the same. We're supposed to have the same self, right? So we're saying if there's an impression of ourselves that is our self, and if it's going to have identity, which is the whole point of it after all, yeah, it's going to have to continue the same way for our whole lives. We have to have some sort of constant impression, yeah, some sort of like constant sensation or perception or feeling that then we could call us. And if we lost that, then we wouldn't be us anymore. And if we're only ourselves for as long as we have it. Does that make sense to everyone? Nice. Remember, guys, the challenge exists to read this in a Scottish accent if you want. Eric, next sentence.
But there's no impression of constant and invariable.
Nice. Megan, what's that mean?
There's no impression that is forever going and never changing.
Yeah, good one. Can anyone think of an impression that sticks around for a long time?
Breathing.
Breathing? Yeah, we often have the experience of breathing, right? But is it invariable, as in unchanging? No, like breathing out is different to breathing in, right? Yeah. And I also don't notice breathing all the time. Yeah, think how boring that would be. Imagine if you had to pay attention to breathing and you had to also study VC. But it's a really good thought. You could say the same sort of thing about like your heartbeat, right? Like when you notice it, it's really constant, but again, it's changing, isn't it? It's variable. It's not invariable and unchanging. Can anyone think of another one that lasts for a long time? Pain, right? You can have a pain. Say you just cut your hand or something while you're making dinner. You can have that pain and it can stay there for maybe a good 10 minutes. Can anyone beat 10 minutes? About 10 minutes, going once. Going once.
When I told my ligament it was constant,
Okay, constant
so
pain.
it was maybe 3 months or so.
3 months of
Well,
constant pain.
When I went to sleep, I couldn't really feel it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as long as you were awake, it was constant pain.
Yeah.
Did it change the pain?
Yes, it did. It dropped it out.
It got better eventually.
What about emotion? Like,
What about heartbreak?
a different type of pain, not physical pain.
What about heartbreak?
Not physical pain, emotional pain.
Yeah,
The heartbreak.
Sure. Yeah, that's possible.
yeah.
I actually broke up with my high school girlfriend in year 11. And that was painful for probably.
You broke up after how many?
I don't know if this happens with you guys. When I broke up with Margaret, this is a long time ago, so I'm happy to chat about it. I'm well over it by now, right? But back then, my experience was that initially I was like, finally we've broken up, it's the best, I'm really relieved. Right? And then I was really happy for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I was completely fine. A lot of my friends reported this exact same thing actually. Like, you're fine, you just go along with your life, you've probably got a bunch more free time. I was texting a lot less. And then I found that after about 3, maybe 4 weeks, it just hit me like anything. And you're just like really sad. You're like, oh no, what's happened to my life? And for me, that lasted for like a couple of months. And then I, got over it eventually.
There's a thing where it's the opposite for the girls. They feel the pain for like a month first, and then the
Yeah.
girl starts to feel it. They message the girl, and the girl's like,
Totally. My ex-girlfriend at that point was heartbroken for like 2 weeks, right? While I was all like, la, la, la. And then we kind of swapped. And she was like, didn't even know who I was, didn't want to talk to me, blah, 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 whatever. And I was kind of like really hit by it, yeah. I don't know, which, looking back, I'm kind of like, oh, that's actually a really good mechanism for making sure we don't get back together. I like that. We missed. We missed our grief stages, so that's good. But yeah, so that happened. But even that was changing day to day. Even hour to hour. Some hours I'd be like, ooh, I'm really sad, this is terrible. And then other hours I'd be like, tacos. Tacos are delicious.
Oh yeah, tacos.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you have an Xbox. When you have a PS4, you got a PS3, whatever was back in the day.
I think maybe a PS4 would be the longest constant feeling of pain.
Don't think of that, dude.
Xbox in India. That's a bit of a stick.
Oh, that's on camera.
Alright. So, the whole point though, guys, is that Hume seems to be right. Yeah, we don't have any constant and unchanging perception. Yeah? Does anyone have a feeling, I asked you this last class, of like a sense of themselves in the way that we like feel pain, or maybe the way that you feel grief might be more like it, or happiness might be nicer, but like about your identity? Does anyone have that? Like a sense of you-ness? That might be a hard question, right? So if you like, think about who you are, do you think it would be different to be, would it feel different to be someone else? Like, would you have a different constant impression?
is that what?
Okay, so Hume thinks no. Hume thinks that's ridiculous. We don't have any impression that is what it's like to be us all the time. Yeah? Let's keep reading. Are we up to pain and pleasure? Jordan, is that yours?
Yes. Pain and pleasure, grief and joy, passions and sensations succeed each other, and never all exist at the same time.
Nice, and can you finish it off?
It cannot therefore be from any of these impressions, or from any other, that the idea of self is derived, and consequently there is no such idea.
He's just like, well, since we have no impression from which we can derive this idea of self, there's no such thing as the idea of self. Deal with it. Yeah? Can you get out the evaluation table I gave you last time? Alright. And the top argument here, we have now completed. This argument is contained in paragraph 1 and 2. You might want to write that actually just next to it, like paragraph 1 and 2, just so you know where it is for future revision. But to break this down into standard form, it's always a bit easier to read in standard form, I think. But anyway, here it is. Premise 1, one impression must give rise to every real idea. So it's just basic empiricism there. Now you may agree or you might disagree with this idea. But anyway, premise 1. Premise 2, self or person is not any one impression, but that to which our several impressions and ideas are supposed to have a reference. Premise 3, if any impression gives rise to the idea of self, the impression must continue invariably, has to be simple and repeatable through the course of our lives. Otherwise, there's no point calling it a self, right? Because we want to have it all the time. Premise 4 is no such impression exists. So the conclusion cannot therefore be from any of these impressions or from any other. But the idea of self is derived, and so there is no such idea. I would like you to choose either. Don't worry about choosing. I just want you to find somewhere that you would attack if you were to challenge this argument. You can challenge the movement from the premises to the conclusion, like you can say that's bad form, this doesn't follow, or you can just say this premise is wrong. Yeah? Work with the people next to you if you like, but find where you would challenge. Number one there. Do you reckon that's right?
We actually get something else.
Ideas all based on other things as well. We have ideas.
Oh, this. Oh, no.
You would just get sad about it.
Okay, so you can have. I think we're talking about. Do
all my hair off.
you reckon
Cut off his hair.
we
That's
have
just
seen
thinking, oh,
but Hume would say
I
that
may
we
not
have
do it
seen
nicely, but at least I know how much I'm going to cut
we
off.
can just
Did you try to do it?
still do basic ideas. So is there anything that's not like that?
That's maybe this one's always
Last night.
It's kind of a weird question. So maybe it's a weird question because it's right. Like maybe there is a
Do you remember what it was when you said
maybe maths? Perfect maths? We don't see that.
it's still long, but it's not a piece. Who's going to cut it off? Every day I don't have that blanket to cover me. That's very sad.
So you reckon the conclusion is good? You have no idea. Sorry, where do you think he goes wrong?
During orientation last year, during his start, yeah,
This long hair.
yeah, her hair was long last year.
I was even busy on this stuff.
Hey, go and use it.
Maybe.
I remember coming
I think I had to attack
one day.
Can
you try that? Can you try it?
Oh, yeah, what's that?
you just do like half or half down?
You can do the cute button
Yeah, that's what you do.
where some puts down.
Oh, yeah.
I know you never
That's
look.
a really good thing.
I
Except when he doesn't think you have any idea.
We have it downstairs.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I feel
your
like-
perceptions
I
aren't
feel like
changing when you're
straightening
asleep.
it.
You don't have any twice. One of the things you don't exist.
Normally I
He's
just
not saying
like
you don't have
a
identity.
flat. I'm like, yeah, but it's a
I'm
good.
not saying that you don't stay the same or you do stay the same. I'm saying that there's no use.
obviously
Right? It's like a full-on hypothesis.
That's all. Your super ladies are really good. One is good, one is good, one is good. Because the senses come from the body, so it has to be part of the identity.
He's happy for you to have a body. He's not happy to have an identity. Like a separate and continuing, right? Like he thinks your body exists, right? But he thinks it's constantly changing. So he's got a really mathematical idea of what it is. So I have is that if you add 1,000 to the number 100,
Friday we used to go out.
they're really close.
That's how I just remember you.
Right? But they're
I
not the
was
same.
wondering why it's familiar. I was like, I've seen her somewhere and I feel really rude, but I remember.
Yeah.
Literally, I
That's
just
the way
remember you
you think
because
about
every
identity.
week I
And you
saw
think
you.
that way about your body and your perception.
I always did drive.
They might be similar, but not.
They always, the person who's there the longest and knows how to do it. They make them do drive for 7 hours straight.
You have to
It's really impressive. That's why I learned.
exactly
Not actually
forces and understand. Like not
The
so
new
much
girl
and
still supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And you can see all the experience of what is the girls who get abused and talking every day.
specific brand
Do,
activity,
right?
but just the
I
fact
don't
that
like
brand
anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah.
And if you're learning how to drive, they don't know because driving
Yes,
for them is
you
like
but you couldn't
they
do that.
don't care what happens to you. They have to keep the score up.
yeah, because the brand is activity.
Any thoughts, Evan?
So you want to do driving
Is your taking it?
under a minute. That's the goal. And if you go over the minute more,
That's why they talk so fast.
yeah, that's why we're like, look at it's so bad. Because they go like, oh, can I help you? Like some people can just say,
Alright.
like, no.
Coming back together.
It's bad because they talk.
Can you tell us the answer?
The answer to what we would attack.
Yeah.
What would you attack, Daniel?
Number four.
Premise 4. No impression exists.
It's an absolute.
We have an absolute impression of self.
I don't think it's absolute.
Absolutes.
Absolutes are wrong.
The swans. Remember the black swan, white swan?
No, all I'm thinking now that you've said absolutes is about Yoda. How absolutes are evil. They're of the Sith.
Only
Sorry.
the Sith feel that
Black swan,
absolutes.
white swan, universals. are bad. Universals are generally bad
That's
unless they're right. Right? Like, there are no black swans is a bad premise if it's wrong.
Yeah.
But if it's like if there are no purple swans, has anyone seen a purple swan?
No.
If there are no purple swans, then as a universal statement, it's fine because it's right? So universal statements are dangerous because we don't usually
You
have.
never know everything.
You never know everything exactly. But that doesn't mean that they're inherently wrong. They can be correct. Yeah, like saying there is matter in the universe is either right or wrong. And some people are going to say that we don't have enough information to say that it is right. But if you do claim it is right, and it does happen to be right, then your argument's fine.
Doesn't matter.
That's a good one. I have to save up all those dad jokes. You're already dead. Alright. So, all ideas have to come from impressions. That's empiricism. There's no certain self because there's no constant, unchanging impression. So there's no continuing self. Alright, number 3. Black father. Actually, Evan, where are you?
Nothing like further.
Black father, have you got enough voice? Togara, can you read?
But father, what must become?
Guys, we're ready? Black father?
But father, what must become of our particular perceptions upon this hypothesis? You continue?
Let's keep going. Read.
Or do I do that?
Yeah.
All these are different and distinguishable and inseparable from each other, and may be separately considered and may exist separately, and have no need of anything to suppose their existence.
Okay, so number 2 is like a massive hypothesis, right? He's saying you have no continuing self. Yeah? Is everyone good with that? So just take a minute to think to yourself, I don't exist, according to Hume. Right? No continuing self, because you are only like, all you've got is your experience of perceptions, right? Which are constantly changing, in a constant state of flux, not repeating, etc. Yeah? So, just like Helgar and Arij have said, all these different and distinguishable and separable perceptions, impressions, they exist separately, right? My sense of cold here on the whiteboard is separate to my sense of hearing my voice right now, yeah? And they're not relying on each other, and they seem to be separate somehow. But also, they have no need of anything to support their existence. So all you are is a bunch of perceptions happening. Not to anyone, they're just perceptions, they're just impressions, and they're just happening. Do you guys remember this objection to Descartes? He said, I think, therefore I am, right? And one objection was, well, there's thinking going on, but there's no assurance that there's a someone doing the thinking. That all you know is that there's thought happening, right? This is what Hume is really saying. There's just a bunch of thoughts happening. Next bit, August?
After what manner, therefore, do they belong to self, and how they are connected with it?
I think it's a pretty straightforward question. Next one.
For my part, when I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other, or heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure.
Does that make sense to everyone? I'll read the next bit as well. I never can catch myself at any time without a perception. I never can observe anything but the perception. When you look into your inner self, right? Like think about your thoughts, think about your perceptions. You can only ever see your perceptions, right? And there's nothing else. Yeah? And can you think about what you are without thinking about your impressions? It's saying that the only experience we have, the only impressions we have are impressions, and we're not anything if we're not having those impressions. Yeah? And they're never the same. And there's never anything else. Yeah? Are we all good so far? I mean, apart from the existential doubt I've just thrown you all into. Cool. Jeremy, back to the start. When my...
Yep, thank you. Last line.
The third last line.
When my perceptions are removed for any time, as by sound sleep, so long am I insensible of myself and may truly be said not to exist.
What's that mean, Nick?
We know how to repeat it without repeating it.
What's the big claim there? Sorry, what was it?
When he has no perceptions.
He doesn't exist. Yeah, nice one. So this is the bit here. When we're asleep, when we're unconscious, right? We can truly be said not to exist. There's no self. He's saying if we are just a bunch of impressions, a bundle of impressions, constantly changing, if there are no impressions, there's nothing to us. Yeah?
What about your impressions in your dream?
Yeah, good point. If you had impressions in a dream, you would be those. That would be what we call you, right? That would be happening. But whenever you look inward to yourself, and you can do that in a dream, right? But if you're not doing that, then you don't exist. I'm going to keep reading the rest because it extends, right? And were all my perceptions removed by death? Imagine I died and there's no perceptions going on anymore. And could I neither think, nor feel, nor see, nor love, nor hate after the dissolution of my body? I should be entirely annihilated. I'd be totally gone. If I had no perceptions, no impressions, I'd be gone. Nor do I conceive what is farther requisite to make me a perfect non-entity. How could you destroy anyone more completely than to get rid of all of their impressions? Does that make sense to everyone? So, the big take-home statement from this is, if you're asleep, you pretty much don't exist. Does that make sense to everyone? Unless you're dreaming, just like Abdul said. Yeah? So maybe let's write that next to it. Sleep equals no impressions equals doesn't exist. Yeah?
What about lucid dreaming?
Again, you exist insofar as the impressions are happening.
But in lucid dreaming, you know you're dreaming and you can control your dream. So you know that you're dreaming and you know that you're not awake. And you have the power to make yourself awake. So is your normal self the same as your lucid dreaming self?
Oh, good question.
What did you say?
Oh, get wrecked, son.
What did you say?
Not quite. Not quite wrecked. Because Hume isn't saying that you are you when you're awake and you're not you when you're asleep. What's Hume saying?
You don't exist.
You're changing. Exactly, Jordan.
There is no.
It's not that you're changing, right? It's not that you're changing or your identity is changing. It's that there are some perceptions at some times and other perceptions at other times. Yeah? And there's no you. There's no identity. Identity is just this myth that we've made up. He's going to explain that in a couple of paragraphs. Yeah? So, Abdul, It's not that you can lucid dream and wake yourself up, right? It's just there are some perceptions which are dreamy perceptions, and then later there are other perceptions which are awakey perceptions, and they just happen. Yeah, that's what Hume's saying. Hand up if you're liking Hume at the moment. You're like, yeah, this is kind of cool. Hand up if you're like, Hume's an idiot. Yeah, interesting.
Well, he was
What was it, Abdul?
What's every needs to cancel?
Oh, Hume. He doesn't have a good sense of well-being, does he? He probably has a fun time. Who are we up to? Damon.
So we are. What's that?
From non-entity. If anyone upon serious.
Yeah. Oh my god.
third line.
What like it is?
And if anyone upon serious and prejudiced reflection thinks he has a different notion of himself, I must confess I can no longer reason with him.
What does that mean? Kevin?
So if someone doesn't think he's himself, he can't.
You can't engage with him. Yeah? You can't reason with him.
With himself.
No, he's talking about someone else. If someone else thinks, upon serious reflection, someone really thinks about it, yeah, and they have a different notion of themselves, then Hume can't talk with them anymore. Yeah? So let's imagine that someone had said, yes, I have an experience, it feels like being at 24 degrees, and that's how I know I'm me. Right? Like someone has a constant experience that never goes away. Right? Hume would say, good for you. If you're like, I don't have that, and so now we can't talk about what identity is. Does that make sense? Maybe that guy has identity and I don't. That's not useful for Hume. Now Hume doesn't really think that anyone has this, right? He actually thinks that people are just like making up a feeling when they say that there's some sort of constant feeling that it's like to be them, right? So what he's saying is that when some people say to him, I have a constant feeling, he's just going to say, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Yeah, it is a bit sad. Typical philosopher, sneaky way out. Abdul, next one for me.
All I can allow him is that he may be in the right as well as I, and that we are essentially different in this particular.
Good. He may perhaps perceive something simple and continued, which he calls himself, though I'm certain there's no such principle in me. Exactly what we were just saying. Everyone good with that? Excellent. Let me just double check. I think we've got all that. Have we got all this? Have we covered all that? Nothing feels impressions. We try to become self-aware. We notice different impressions. We never encounter anything but these. Like when you think to yourself, what makes me up? What makes up my feeling of myself? We only have a bunch of impressions and nothing else. Yeah? Did anyone ever ask their parents what happens when we die? Does anyone mind sharing the answer? Did anyone's parents say it's like you go to sleep for a long time?
No. Reincarnation.
Your parents all said reincarnation. Okay. Yeah, different parents to me.
My dad said nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, nothing?
You just disintegrate.
There's nothingness?
You just disintegrate.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Parents and doctors, there's nothing to it.
Some parents say it's just like going to sleep forever, right? So that's Daniel's like heaven. I mean, sleep is pretty good, but sleep is like non-existence, right? That's the same idea Hume has here. Yeah, he's not talking about sleep like when you dream. He's talking about sleep when your impressions and your thoughts cease. Yeah? All good? All right. I want to quickly read through 4, and I will post homework on Facebook instead of. Yeah, sorry guys. Actually, I just want to read through the start, so you can just listen if you like. And and you've heard this before, I just want to reinforce it. But setting aside some metaphysicians of this kind, people who think they have that constant thing, I may venture to affirm of the rest of mankind that they're nothing but a bundle or collection of different perceptions, which succeed each other with an inconceivable rapidity, are in a perpetual flux and movement. You guys ever thought about like how fast thoughts happen? It's kind of fun.
It's crazy.
Can everyone think about it? How fast thoughts can happen?
Think about it.
Think about it. Think about it. How long does it take you to think about it? Yeah, I don't know. How could you measure the speed of thought? That's a weird.
The speed of thought.
Isn't it?
The speed of.
I mean, maybe a brain scientist would say that you measure like the electrical impulses in your brain or something. That doesn't really capture what we're going for, does it?
It's so weird.
Alright, the rest of this, there's a couple of different ideas. The main idea is that we have constantly changing different impressions, right? Is everyone with me still? We have constantly changing different impressions. They change with an inconceivable rapidity, like inconceivably fast. Yeah? And they're in constant flux. The second one, he says that it's like a theatre, a cinema, with constantly different players jumping on the stage, going across, always changing. Yeah, our mind is like a theatre. But, really important differentiation, it's not